All right, let's get right into it. If you're dreaming of working, studying, or maybe even living in another country, chances are you've run into this one big hurdle. It's a four-letter word, IELTS. And yeah, it can feel like a huge wall. But today, we're going to do more than just talk about the IELTS exam. We're going to show you how to beat it. The key? It's all about shifting your mindset from fear to strategy. So you've got your sights set on a new job, a university, or just a whole new life somewhere else, right? An English-speaking country, perhaps. Well, as you've probably figured out, there's usually a gatekeeper standing in the way. And it's a pretty popular one, a test that millions, and I mean millions of people take every single year. And yup, that gatekeeper is the IELTS. Now that stands for the International English Language Testing System. I know, it sounds super official. Kind of scary, right? But trust me, once you pull back the curtain and see what it's really about, it gets a whole lot less intimidating. And we're not talking about some small-time quiz here. The scale of this thing is just huge. It's not just an English test. It is the world's most popular English proficiency test. Think of it like this. It's the key that can unlock some seriously big doors. We're talking amazing jobs, top-tier universities, and brand new lives in a different country. And that's why getting a handle on it is so important. Okay, so how do we tackle this thing? Well, you know the old saying, right? You gotta know your enemy. So the first step is to really understand what we're up against. Let's pull this test apart and see what makes it tick. Now, here's some good news right off the bat. There's a ton of consistency here. You can take it on paper or on a computer. Doesn't matter. The test format is exactly the same. And get this, you do not have to worry about faking a perfect British or American accent. It's an international test, so they're looking for international English. Simple as that. And the whole thing is broken down into 4 distinct sections. All right, if we're going to conquer this test, we need a map of the battlefield. So let's zoom in and really look at these 4 sections. What are they, and what are they actually asking you to do? Okay, here it is. The whole exam on one page. You got your listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And what should jump out at you right away? The time, 60 minutes for 40 reading questions. That's intense. And then another 60 minutes to write 2 different things, a report and an essay. And that speaking test, it's over in like 15 minutes, but wow, it's a sprint. This right here is the challenge we're facing. First up, listening. This section is all about pure, uncut focus. It starts off manageable, and then, boom, it gets harder and harder. And here's the real kicker. You only hear the recording once. That's it. No replays. Yikes. Plus, you're going to hear all kinds of accents. British, American, Australian, you name it. So your ears really need to be ready for anything. Next, reading. I like to think of this one as a race against the clock. You've got 3 pretty long passages to get through, and they throw like 14 different types of questions at you. So it's not straightforward. But the biggest enemy here? It's the clock. Especially if you're doing the paper version, because you have to write all your answers on a separate sheet. And no, you don't get extra time for that. Okay, now for the writing section. For this part, you kind of have to wear 2 different hats. For task 1, you're like a data analyst. You've got to look at a chart or a graph and just describe what you see. Then for task 2, you switch hats and become an essayist, building a solid, formal argument about some topic. And here's a little insider tip. They're looking at way more than just your grammar. It's about your structure, your logic, and this is crucial. Did you actually answer the question they asked? And finally, we have the speaking test. This is actually a face-to-face chat with a real person, an examiner. They try to make it feel pretty informal, like a conversation, but don't be fooled, it is very structured. It's broken into 3 parts where you'll answer some questions about yourself, give a little 2-minute speech that you get a minute to prep for, and then have a more in-depth discussion. Oh, and by the way, the whole thing is recorded. Okay. So that's the test. Phew. It seems like a pretty massive mountain to climb, doesn't it? But what if I told you the secret to getting a really high score isn't what you probably think it is? What if there's this one little shift in how you look at it, a secret that just changes the entire game? This is the big question, right? The one everyone worries about. Is it all about having perfect, flawless English? Do I need to know a million fancy words? Do I have to sound like I was born in London or New York to get a good score? It's a totally normal thing to think, but honestly, it's the single biggest myth about this test. And don't just take it from me. Look at this quote from Jessie in Singapore. It just hits the nail on the head. She says, I always thought IELTS is about proficiency in English, but I was wrong. And here's the key part. IELTS is all about techniques and strategies. It's not just an English test. It's a game, and it's about how well you know the rules. This is the big idea. The one thing I want you to remember. The IELTS is a game of strategy. That's it. It's a standardized test, which means it has patterns, it has traps, it has tricks. If you walk in thinking it's just about your English level, you're making a huge mistake. But if you walk in treating it like a strategic puzzle, well, that's a game you can absolutely win. Okay, so if it's a game, you're probably wondering, what are the moves? What are the strategies? So let's get super practical. Let's look at a really powerful technique for the listening section, because, that's the one that gets a lot of people. I call this one the divide and conquer strategy. So you know how the recording gives you these little 20 or 30-second pauses? Most people just panic. Not you. You're going to use that time like a surgeon. When the voice says, now look at questions 1 to 4, you do exactly that. You only look at those questions. You grab a pencil, you underline the keywords, you try to guess what kind of answer they want, and then you stop. You draw a mental line and don't look ahead. It keeps you laser focused on the now and stops you from feeling totally overwhelmed. And here is a perfect example of one of their favorite little traps. I call it the chameleon question. They love using synonyms to trick you. So the question on your paper might say something like, why was Catherine furious? But then in the audio, you'll hear, well, Catherine was angry because. See, if you're just listening for the word furious, you could completely miss it. This is exactly why knowing the strategy is so much more powerful than just knowing a lot of words. You see, thinking about the test this way, as a game of strategy, it just changes everything. And look, you don't have to just take my word for it. Let's look at some real-life examples of what's possible when you stop being afraid and start being strategic. Let's start with Victor. An overall score of 8.5 is, wow, that's incredible. But zoom in a little closer, a perfect 9.0 in reading, a perfect score. You do not get that by accident. That is what happens when you master the very specific techniques and strategies needed for that one section. Or how about Divya from India? She said she was absolutely astonished because she got a perfect 9 in the speaking module. A perfect 9. That is just amazing. And it's proof of what happens when your hard prep work pays off. It wasn't just that she could speak English well, it's that she knew exactly what those examiners wanted to hear. Now, this one from Mari is one of my favorites. She said she was terrified she wouldn't even get a 6.5, which is a score a lot of people aim for. But what happened? She focused on the strategies, and she ended up with a band 8. That is just a perfect example of what happens when you replace fear with a solid plan. And one more, Rommel from the Philippines. He said at first he was really scared to even take the test, but he found the right resources and decided to study by himself. And he did it. He got a great score with an 8.5 in speaking. It just goes to show you, with the right strategies, you really can do this on your own. So let's wrap this all up. What's the big takeaway? The IELTS is not a test of how good your English is. It's not a judgment on you. It is a test of your preparation, a test of your strategy, a test of how well you understand the game. It is a system, and any system can be figured out. So the real question isn't, is my English good enough? The real question is this: are you ready to beat the test?